This is a gaming PC, and I'm not talking about the slow trickle of afterthought releases that make PC ports look good by comparison. Thanks to Apple's new game porting toolkit, not only will the process of porting games to Mac be much simpler for developers, but gamers can play PC games today, right now, on Apple Silicon Macs. Who'd have thought it? After all these years of giving zero cares whatsoever about gamers, is Apple finally bringing the fight to Microsoft in gaming? Is it any good? Am I about to make the switch? Our setup, which Emily is just putting the finishing touches on right now, is an M1 Ultra Mac Studio with 128 gigs of unified memory. We're running macOS Sonoma, which works best with the game porting toolkit right now, and we actually need to use two versions of Steam, the Mac native one and the Windows one. The Mac version is easy. That's it. Theoretically, this is working now. But the Windows version of Steam must be run from the command line for reasons that we're going to get into in a bit more detail later. Of course, there's no window snapping on Mac, because why would there be? You can just pay for that if you want it.
You can. It's a nice app.
You know what? It doesn't matter. The point is, we're going to try some games. Cyberpunk?
Cyberpunk?
Yeah, Cyberpunk.
Hey.
Hey. Whoa. Ooh. Okay, I know you did most of the work before I came here, and obviously it's not that easy, but like, it's working.
It would have been more easy if the GUI method worked, but it should be much easier in the future.
Instructions say, adjust graphics settings and resolution and see what happens to frame rate. I see.
Looks like right now we're at about 20.
Let's go to something more reasonable. Medium. Is this likely to actually complete, or are you just trolling me?
Well, I mean, there's only one way to find out. I mean, if you hit the space bar, it might proceed.
I mean, one way to find out is to ask you if you're just trolling me. Oh, it's running! 11 FPS. It does not look great.
Well, I mean, it looks okay, as long as you only look at, like, still frames.
The still frames don't look great.
Well, we're at 720p. You could boost the resolution.
I mean, I could. Wait, it's not running any worse. The truth is, I'm kind of speechless right now. It's not perfect, the performance obviously sucks, and at times, Steam and/or the game might crash or become unresponsive, but this is still amazing, and there are workarounds. If you do experience a crash, just open the activity monitor, search for Wine, select all processes, then click the arrows in the top right and click Force Quit. Wait a second. Wine? How does a piece of Linux software that is not an emulator figure into all of this? Here's the thing. Game Porting Toolkit is essentially a distribution of CodeWeaver's crossover flavor of Wine, with what appears to be the DXVK translation layer for DirectX 9 through 11, and then Apple's own homespun D3D metal translation wrapper for DirectX 12, which isn't without controversy. The thing is, Apple has a history of using open source tools to enrich their own proprietary solutions, like Cups for printing and the KHTML browser engine that became Safari's WebKit and ultimately Chrome. And like these other situations, Game Porting Toolkit is perfectly legal, but is understandably rubbing some members of the open source community the wrong way, given both Apple's restrictive licensing agreement for the toolkit and their historically narrow contributions back to open source software. Now, my notes here only say, move on at your discretion. Of the 9 games installed, 5 of them work.
Correct. Okay.
I want to play Civ. Fine. How about Hollow Knight? Let's go, Hollow Knight. What are the controls for this game on a keyboard and mouse? I truthfully have no idea. Holy crap, this is running at 60 FPS and actually feels, I mean, I suck, but other than that, it feels fine.
Input lag?
Hard to say. Even though this is a bit of a twitchy game, I find it kind of forgiving in terms of input lag. I didn't have trouble playing it on the Logitech G Cloud, for example. It seems pretty good. I would say it seems pretty darn good.
I mean, it seems like from the sound to what I'm seeing on screen, it seems pretty decent. Like maybe there's a little bit, but
it's definitely usable. Compatibility is a mixed bag then, which makes sense given the similarity to Valve's Proton compatibility layer for Linux, and also makes sense considering the extra step that's going on here of running through the Rosetta translation layer, which handles running x86 code on Apple Silicon. And unlike Proton, very few support packages are installed by default, which can make things problematic if you're trying to use it like Proton. It's also worth noting that while D3D Metal is closed source, Crossover is gaining support for DirectX 12 this year too, so Game Porting Toolkit might not be the only option for gamers on Mac. Though of course, it's not really intended to be. Let's go, F1, let's go. Oh, your version of Windows is older than the minimum version required. Yes, I wish to continue. Oh.
We're sorry, but you can't.
There is no friggin' way that Halo Infinite runs.
I mean, you're not currently running Halo Infinite, you're running...
I'm not running Halo Infinite because I don't think that's gonna run. I'm trying to find ones that will run. Hey, I think I found one. The last Total War game I played was Rome Total War.
The remake or the original?
The original. Hey, this is running. Oh my God. Oh my God. Okay, let's go gamers. Oh crap. Well, I suck. This overlay in the corner here shows us how much performance we're leaving on the table due to translation layers and not emulation. It's a lot. We're using about 20% of our GPU right now. And Apple knows that, but that's okay, because the general idea behind this tool, and Apple was very clear about it, is that a developer using a common framework like Unity or Unreal Engine can simply compile a Mac version of their software without having to rewrite the graphics, audio, or input routines that they've already written for Windows. They're not supposed to just use it like this. And all of that sounds great, but as we know, it's not always that simple in the real world. Before we talk about that though, let's discuss the advantages of this approach, with the biggest one being the it just works simplicity. But unfortunately, that's about it. I mean, in theory, it does make it easier to create a native version of your game as well. But if the way things are going on Linux is anything to go by, the translation layer forever approach is the more likely outcome. So then let's talk about the drawbacks of that. The first is that performance should, in theory, be pretty close to Proton on Linux. So usually worse than Windows, though sometimes equal or even better. And the second is that if developers are not motivated to create true native ports, this compatibility and performance is always going to be behind. And by more than non-gamer Apple executives probably realize. The thing is, even a compatible game might have dependencies that are not created by the developer. Like, say for example, anti-cheat, the developers of which have very little incentive to port their software to these rando, not properly supported platforms. Let's see if we can find one like that. Like say, Halo Infinite. Yeah, okay, that didn't take long. See you later, buddy. I mean, I don't actually know that that's because of anti-cheat, but it almost certainly isn't helping. But you told me there was an anti-cheat one that you did manage to get working. And I assume it's this because this is all that's left.
Yes. Elden Ring is the only one that I got to work with anti-cheat. So the idea behind it though, is that instead of doing anything special, what you do is you rename the anti-cheats executable, because it starts up and then scans things, and then it launches the game. You rename that executable, then you rename the game's executable to that executable's name. So then Steam just launches the game. The problem is that from there, you don't have any online support whatsoever.
Does that matter in Elden Ring?
I mean, it depends on how you play the game.
In Elden Ring, you need online.
You do?
There's actually quite a bit of multiplayer in Elden Ring.
Or you could just not do that. Wow. Oh wait, oh okay, no, that worked. I swear, the first time I whacked one of those pots, there was a delayed reaction for it to crumble.
It might have been shader compilation.
That makes sense. Okay, that wasn't on me. I had that lined up. I swear it. Do you see that?
I can't really see much.
No, don't lie. You saw that.
From this angle, all I see is just a bunch of gray blobs.
No, editor, help me out here. I was lined up with the big one.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, hey, did you notice the FPS rose?
No.
It was at like 15, now it's like 37.
What? Shut up, that can't be running at 37 FPS. Ooh, no way. Elden Ring's actually running kinda okay.
I guess it needed to warm up the shaders.
Interesting. 30 FPS Elden Ring. I mean, at what resolution though? 1080p, maximum quality. And we got those results with the GPU at 20% and before even hydrating with this water bottle from lttstore.com. It's empty, whatever. Doesn't matter. The point is, it's a very mixed bag. And not everyone wants to just buy and try random games, and there's no ProtonDB for Mac yet. But what there is a community-curated Google Sheet that is full of lots of interesting nuggets. Here are some interesting ones. Halo Infinite crashed on the crossover wine that is used in GPT, and I don't mean ChatGPT, I mean Game Porting Toolkit, but it works with Proton. And given its anti-cheat and Microsoft account dependencies, I suspect that that's only the case because Valve had to do some special sauce to get that working. And I have to say, I wonder if Apple will be willing to put in the work. Probably not, given that their stated purpose is for developers to be the one to do the work. How optimistic? More on that later. Also, any game that requires AVX or AVX2 instructions will fail. Apple Silicon doesn't support it, and neither does their Rosetta translation layer. VSync also appears to be enforced by the compositor regardless of the in-game settings, so you will only ever get your display's refresh rate in FPS. Also, getting it to work is a pain, involving terminal commands and the x86 version of Homebrew. Isaac Marovitz, the person who posted the infamous video of running Cyberpunk on a Mac, modified his Whiskey app to support the Game Porting Toolkit, but the most recent version, as of us recording this, doesn't work, though I suspect by the time we release this video, it will be patched, so keep an eye on that. Back to that developer conversation though. Apple's gonna have to support and promote this tool heavily to overcome their reputation among game developers. They have a long history of ignoring the gaming industry, dating back to Steve Jobs, according to programming legend John Carmack. Gabe Newell of Valve claimed that Apple kept coming to them talking about supporting games, but just nothing would ever come of it. And so far, no major developers that I could find have publicly expressed support, besides Hideo Kojima, who Apple had present during their WWDC 2023 keynote, where the Game Porting Toolkit was announced. Some high-profile releases have been coming to Mac recently, like Resident Evil Village and No Man's Sky, and there are some Mac-native games. In fact, we've got a couple of them installed. So I guess the question that this raises now is, if all went according to plan, what kind of performance improvements might we see? We don't get an FPS counter, but I'm expecting the performance to be markedly better than when we were running with the translation layer.
And it looks like, weird camera bug aside, it looks like it's a lot smoother.
The performance is way better.
Like even if it's just 60 versus 60, the frame pacing is a lot better right here. You can tell.
Much better, and the latency is markedly better as well. Okay, I'm gonna win this fight this time though.
Oh, come on, we have more stuff to shoot today.
That's true. Okay, I don't have time to win this fight. But I do have time to talk about the different kinds of native games that run on macOS. Total War is running on ARM, but uses Rosetta for some of the multiplayer, whereas Shadow of the Tomb Raider actually uses Rosetta for the port. So from a CPU standpoint, it's actually using the same tools, that is Rosetta, as the Game Porting Toolkit. The difference then would be...
Basically, this is running bare metal,
using the Metal API.
Whereas the Game Porting Toolkit version would be using D3D Metal, the translation layer.
So that gives us some idea of how much we're losing to the translation layer. Yeah, it's a lot worse than running on Metal API. But that shouldn't matter, because if Apple can stop paying lip service to gaming and actually throw their hat into the ring, the Game Porting Toolkit could be a game changer in the way that they're presenting it. As it is right now though, it's a curiosity at best for end users, and time will tell if this is actually a useful tool that will motivate developers to port their games natively, which is, gonna be necessary for a good experience. Just like this good experience